Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About It. This is your host, Taylor, and I cannot wait to share with y'all today's guest. We have Lola Jean, who is a sex educator, mental health professional, a wrestler, a Domme, and a world record holder for volume of squirting. Solo. Okay, and we're going to get into that, and I am so excited to share it with y'all. As always, before we get into an episode, before we get into an interview, I hope you are coming in listening with an open mind, an open heart, and open ears. And make sure to check out the links in our bio of the podcast episode, the episode notes, so that you can support and follow any guests that we have here on the show. If you're not already, please make sure you're following us on Instagram at Let's Talk About It _podcast. And I can't wait for y'all to hear about Lola, okay? Because she brings a refreshing understanding to sex, sexuality, and kink to push individuals past what they think that they're capable of, okay? And this was a great time. So let's talk about it. All right. Hello. Welcome, Lola Jean, to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm honestly so excited about this. Like, I love meeting with other sex educators and sex experts because, like, it's just a different energy, you know? Like, I love the energy that you bring and all the work that you do. Like, you stay busy.
Yeah. I feel like that's what my colleagues know me for right now. Everyone's just like, you need a vacation. I'm like, I think I might. I'm taking it next week. We'll be good.
Good. Yes. Prioritize the pleasure. Yes. Well, I'm wondering if we could start off just with you kind of sharing a little bit about the work that you do. Granted, it's a lot of different things. But if you could start us off with just kind of some of what it is that you do today.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of different positions that I hold. So currently I'm a sex educator. I'm an occasional pro dom, a fetish wrestler, and the reigning world record holder in volume squirting. For my style of education and of what I enjoy doing and what people seem to enjoy buying is I like creating and curating experiences. So whether those are classes or episodic series or like social media content or like on occasion in-person events, that's what how I enjoy interacting with people and creating spaces for people to confront their discomfort and really start to question themselves. So a lot less of like the one-on-one coaching. I'll do that occasionally, but that's not really where my passion lies.
Yeah. How did you find yourself here?
By accident. I mean, I'd always been a very sexual being. Like the second time I ever had like penetrative sex was a threesome, and that was like not planned. It just happened. So like I'd always been, a little bit on the edgier side, so to speak. But it was a period where I had quit my job in advertising because I was very unhappy, and I was waitressing, and then I got fired from that job because I have a problem with authority. And I was trying to find a job I didn't hate, and I didn't want to go back to corporate world. So I took a lot of odd jobs, and I think it was like one of my first positions within the sexuality space was being a consent monitor at a play party. And that's when I realized like, oh, maybe there's other things I can do in this industry, but I still didn't think I was going to be a sex educator. I was just like trying to make ends meet. So I started doing wrestling, being a dom, doing like assisting a sex educator all at the same time. And things kind of just bubbled up naturally. And those are the things where like when they happen that way, you have to like listen to fate a little bit.
Yeah. Kind of go where life is taking you, seeing the opportunities that are in front of you and staying open to it. Can you touch on wrestling? Because I don't think many of my listeners would be familiar.
No, I think even most people who are familiar, like I was trying to teach someone the other day and I think we're thinking more of like collegiate wrestling, or some people think it's WWE, and it's not really any of those things. So fetish wrestling is where usually like someone in a femme body is going to be dominating or overpowering whoever the other person is. And I do this both professionally and in my personal life. But it's really just using a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu because firstly, like the point of that is to gain an advantage over your person. There's going to be a lot of closeness. So it's really to make that, you know, more physical, make it a little bit more sexual. And a lot of it is about feeling trapped, feeling restrained by someone who is believably stronger than you. And there are a lot of different things I think that can lend itself into general BDSM, but that's the main point of it. And some of my sessions are competitive, some of them are semi-competitive, some are more like fantasy or fear-driven. Others, I just lift people up for an hour. So it's all over the place, but it's a niche fetish that I found early on in my career. And I was like, oh my God, this plays to everything I like and that I'm good at. I'm so competitive. I love to trash talk. It's really fun.
I love it. I love it. Finding the things that just actually bring you joy and passion and that kind of bring out that playfulness and that excitement in you and being able to like make money doing that.
Yeah, right. It's the dream. It's great. My fantasy football league is so proud.
Yes. Well, kind of on that note, can you talk about the Kinky Night School? The co-headmistress.
Yeah. So 7 Days of Domination is another happy accident. Two of my colleagues, Mistress Shayla and Lady Euphoria, we were in the process of creating a different school and university for building confidence that has nothing to do with BDSM. And in the beginning of the pandemic, since that had kind of got cut in half of what we were planning to do, we put together this event with like some of our colleagues. And we're like, okay, we just have to make $400 and then we can cover the cost to pay our friends. And that was the goal. And then we made $3,000 and we really like helped people through the pandemic. So now we're about to put on our 6th different iteration of that. And it's intended for people that are aspiring pros or lifestylers. But we've been able to go into such specific topics with all of these different presenters. And I think it's a great way to show that there are so many different styles of domination and ways to go about this. So you can kind of pick and choose of like which presenter or person matches a style that you want to emulate or what's a path you could potentially go down.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's an area that people are super unfamiliar with and that feels very, very niche when I think actually on like a deeper level, many, many more people than you think are interested in it, kind of engage with it on some level in their personal lives anyway, and maybe it's just not tapped into. So I love that you are like creating opportunities and having it be like accessible for people to be able to explore deeper.
Yeah. And, you know, while it's regular price for like the general public, if anyone is a sex worker or aspiring sex worker, we offer a really hefty discount to make a lot of this education very accessible to people. And even without that, like the amount of, we have, I think like over 40 courses at this point, and we're about to have some of like the legends of domination, people that have been doing this for like 20 years, come on and share some things with us as well.
Amazing. What would you say are some of like the myths associated with doing dom work?
I think one of the main things is that it's easy and it's just about being mean to people and demanding things, and like the money kind of just comes easily because that's the representation we see a lot on social media, because that's also part of the fantasy of just seeing somebody with like counting all these $100 bills and like you think, oh wow, they must have done nothing to do that. Or like I have a pay pig in my personal life. And like, I think talking to someone of like, oh, I think I might be getting like, you know, a debit card to his checking account. That's what every little girl dreams of growing up. And to them, it like sounds so easy. And I'm like, oh, this was like 5 years in the making. Like there's like a lot of work that goes into it. But I think a lot of people think that it's like very easy money. And given for, you know, the amount of our hourly rates, it probably seems like that. But then, you know, there's a lot of admin and safety that goes on behind the scenes as well. And also not all of it is about pain and being mean. Yeah.
I love that. It's not all about pain and being mean. Absolutely. I think those are huge kind of stereotypes associated with dom work.
Yeah. Or just, I mean, even in my personal life, I feel like there's people that are like, oh, I want to be dominated, but then I don't get anything beyond that. And it's like, I can't really do anything with that because there's so many different ways to do that. And I really need to get to know you, what you like and what you don't like. Otherwise, I'm just going to be like, throwing darts, or maybe it's a style that doesn't work for me. I'm very mental. I'm very verbal and cerebral. So people that are very physical, that might not work with me.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you kind of say to someone who maybe isn't sure that they are interested in being dominated, but in some ways they might be enjoying it unintentionally, I guess maybe is the word, already in their sex lives? Like, what are things you would say you maybe see from people when they first come in that they're interested in, or that they've already had experiences with, where it's kind of like, oh, maybe this is something to explore deeper?
I mean, I think anyone can really enjoy any kind of submission, regardless of how they identify. It's just more of a question of who and in what situations do you feel safe enough to be that vulnerable? Because it's about making a safe, non-physical space to be vulnerable. And a lot of the times what's really like intoxicating is either we're like confronting a fear, we're able to give up control, we're able to be vulnerable in a world where we're not able to do these things. But because you set up certain constraints, that's what it may be. So for people that are insecure about how they look or how they perform sexually, you could have some sort of like worship kind of session, or you could have something that's not focused on the thing that you're worried about, or you could have something that's hyper focused on the things that you're worried about. So I think a lot of people end up playing with control, especially during the pandemic. We've all had that taken from us. We don't have any control over what 2 months from now is going to look like. So I think anyone can really tap into it. It's just taking away this idea that submission equals weakness.
Yeah. Because you actually do hold a lot of power in your submission.
I mean, in both contexts, it's not that, like, I think there's also a common misconception that like the sub has all of the power and control. Not necessarily. I think both positions have power and control. It's called autonomy, but it's more so that an experience has to be crafted around a submissive. It doesn't mean the submissive gets everything that they want. Because like I was saying, I'm not really a physical dom. So even if my submissive wants those things, I'm like, that doesn't really work for me. But it still has to be crafted around the submissive's experience. So it's not really about them being weak if they have the autonomy to speak about what they want and have something that's pretty much made entirely for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, I want to take a short break right here. I know I like to do these as little mental health kind of check-ins, pleasure check-ins, and today I'm really looking forward to sharing this with y'all because this is a fantastic resource. So much of the work I do with clients revolves around self-compassion, and it sounds super woo-woo-y, and I know sometimes it feels like, well, what even is that? How do we actually hold space for that? How do we actually practice that? And often I encourage folks to journal. And oftentimes folks feel a sense of loss when it comes to journaling, some confusion, right? Of where did they begin? How do they do this? Sometimes it feels scary to start journaling because there isn't guidance and it feels like you're going to start spiraling. And I'm so thrilled to share this with y'all. There's this journal. It's a guided journal, walks you through 91 days of like a self-love journal. And it is honestly fantastic. They partnered with psychologists, clinical therapists, researchers, psychiatrists, and other mental health specialists who have years of experiences and are like really actually helping people walk through their self-love journey. And the company's called Switch. And so the journal that they have, it's in 3 different sections. It walks you through like reframing things, self-kindness, common humanity, mindfulness, which are like the 3 main components of self-compassion, and actually provides you like structured exercises and things to do. Also, not to mention, it's like a very, very cute journal. Okay. There's plants all in it. It's a very well done product and super, super helpful. So highly, highly recommend it. If you feel like journaling is kind of a scary place to go, if you want to like kind of have a little bit more accountability with your check-ins with yourself, maybe maybe you feel like a friend could really benefit from it. Maybe there's a friend going through a really, really rough time right now where they could, practice some self-compassion, where maybe they're being really hard on themselves. I'm sure you're a little hard on yourself sometimes. We all are. So I honestly think anybody could benefit from this journal by Switch and actually have some support in transforming your negative self-critical thoughts into self-love through self-compassion. So you can use our code TALK20 today at switchresearch.org, and you can get 20% off your purchase. Again, that's TALK20 at switchresearch.org and get 20% off your purchase. So I hope you enjoy that and take advantage of this resource while we got it for y'all, okay? And now we can get back to the show. Oh my God, there's literally so many things I want to talk to you about. And I already love everything that you're saying. So I'm like, time. First, I love that you mentioned safety as a piece of that, because I do think even in my own personal life, there's partners that I have felt super safe with to kind of take on that more submissive type of role. And we've been able to have great communication around that and it feel really safe. And then there's been partners where I don't necessarily feel super safe, and where then I have kind of ended up taking on more of a Dom type of role where I do feel more comfortable and I feel like I do have some control, which was also something I didn't feel I had in the relationship to begin with. So not my healthiest relationship, not my happiest relationship, but definitely was able to explore some of those power dynamics a bit more. Don't know if it's for better or for worse, but regardless was an experience. But I would love...
I think regardless of that, I think being able to play with power dynamics can be a really great tool in a relationship, because it's not just that you have to communicate more. You have to realize more about how does this make me feel? What do I like about this? Why do I not feel safe? Why do I feel safe? So even if it's, whether it's like the healthiest relationship or not, it forces you to think more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think in one of your posts on social media, you talked about part of your Dom work kind of being almost like you're doing improv. And that was something that I kind of struggled with, because I feel like in the one relationship where I did kind of step into that more, where it was maybe more the stereotypical of me being mean to him and kind of belittling and penis humiliation and cuckolding and that kind of stuff, where I kind of surprised myself a little bit at kind of being good at being mean in some ways, where I was like, oh, she's a bitch.
It's like you're given that permission though. So it's like, no, but it's good. It's fine.
Yeah. It was a very exciting and different kind of role to experiment with. And I didn't ever do it, but pegging became a conversation. And I know I've seen you talk a little bit about pegging. I've talked on social media. I've had Luna on the podcast in the past who coined the term peg the patriarchy. And you did a post on it recently as well, kind of clarifying assumptions around pegging. And I've been questioned on this in my personal life about kind of supporting the phrase peg the patriarchy and what it actually is symbolizing, what messages we are perpetuating when we say that. Wondering if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So I've had a 5-part series on pegging that's been out for a bit over a year now. And that's it's not pegging for dominance. It's just pegging in a relationship, whether it's sexual or emotional, and a lot of sensual pegging. Because I think the main thing that we see with pegging is we see it as an act of dominance, or we see it only as doggy style or this one thing. And it's not always going to look like a huge dildo ramming into someone's butt unless that's what, a certain person wants. But I think with any terminology, especially one that is a bit older or comes from times where, you know, we weren't necessarily thinking in the same ways, or we weren't challenging things in the same ways. I think that the word isn't inherently problematic, but I think we can also adjust its definition. So it was created more thinking about like cis women penetrating cis men anally. And there's also thoughts that it's, you know, transphobic or homophobic. And the way I like to think of pegging is that, you know, anyone with a strap-on penetrating a person anally. And, you know, if you identify your strap-on as part of your body, you also don't have to call it pegging. You can call it sex. You can call you can call it whatever you want. And I think that, you know, for the people who do say that it's like homophobic or transphobic or anything like that, I think that from a lot of my experience as well, that, you know, there's an idea that thinking like, oh, if I'm having sex with a woman, it's not gay. And like, well, yeah, because that gay is about who you're sexually attracted to. It's not about what's going into your butt. And I think it's a really great way where, you know, pegging is kind of an act of, you know, rebuking the patriarchy, because you're doing something that the patriarchy says is not masculine, or it's not manly, or whatever that may be. So you're already doing something that goes against it. And then, you know, you don't change as a person, and you're still good at your job, and, you know, you still have a family, whatever it may be. So I think it can be a very like healing experience for people who maybe this was, you know, maybe something shameful that they're able to take pleasure in, or realize that, you know, their body is capable of more than they gave it credit for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I do think it, to your point of kind of changing the definition around it and helping educate people on that is super crucial. And I also am kind of questioning myself here, where most of the population is not educated on it. And so when someone sees peg the patriarchy, I think they're also thinking like destroy it. Like, yeah, we're going to fuck up the patriarchy. We're going to fuck the patriarchy so hard, you know, to where what message does that then give to what pegging is? What, in some ways, does it not then perhaps also perpetuate the elements of masculinity associated with patriarchy? I don't know. Exactly, it's so new. Like, there's so many layers where I'm like just looking into it a lot deeper than I previously was recently.
I mean, with 3 words, there's not really a whole lot of room for nuance. And I don't think it was intended to be that type of a phrase. No. It's just something that's very catchy. And it doesn't mean like, oh, we should be giving the patriarchy pleasure. But I do think it's interesting that people are just assuming that, oh, this is like weak, an act of like, whatever it may be, weakness, subversion. But I mean, you know, the only, like, for people who have bullied me in the past, there's a certain trope that they represent. And because of my past, those are people I don't want to engage with unless I'm completely subverting that narrative. So like, I'm only really going to do sexual things with bros if I'm pegging them or there's some sort of BDSM element. I had a lifestyle submissive named Slave Bro. And that was like a lot of the reason why that worked as well. So I think it's not necessarily of like, you know, giving pleasure, but it's something that could be a start to more realization.
See, I don't know, because part of me wants to say, maybe it could be about pleasure, that when for example, like when I work with clients on shame and there's something internally, you know, that they are having that shame voice come up to. And often we want to like just shove that shame down. We want to be like, oh, that's really mean. You know, we want to bully the bully. And with patriarchy being our bully, like, I always think it's important to recognize where that bully came from. And oftentimes that bully is also hurting. And is there a way that we can understand that we can speak to it in a way that is healing? And when we come to terms with that, then we can kind of, you know, heal ourselves in turn. And so part of me is like, as you say, it's not about pleasure. Part of me is thinking, well, could it be that maybe the patriarchy does need some tenderness, some pleasure?
I mean, I think because it's like they don't want the pleasure that they've said is the patriarchy. So like a lot of it is thinking about, you know, we have these preferences, where do they come from, and beginning to question that. And, you know, I think it could be pleasure, but ultimately, you know, it's not pegging that's going to solve the patriarchy. It's going to be somewhat of a mirror or reflection or the ability to look inwards and question that, and also to not feel threatened. When I used to do some men's groups with some colleagues, like after Me Too really like gained a lot of movement, it was figuring out of like, okay, people are really on the defensive and they're trying to blame other people because they never want to see them as the bad person. When in reality, we're all capable of good and evil, and we're all going to be some shade of that. And the inability to accept that I have done some bad things, I do bad things, and I might continue to do some bad things. And just thinking that, no, I'm a good person if I ignore all this and I highlight someone who's way worse than me. Yeah. And like, that's not doing anyone a favor.
Yeah. I could keep going on and on about this with you. But I do want to make sure we talk about some of the other things here. And since we're talking about penises, you shared on social media about penis envy. And I've never seen anybody else share this before, that like one of your fetishes is to hold a penis while they pee. And I fucking love doing that. And literally with like every partner, I offer it and I try to do it. And it's like always this like weird thing where they're like, what are you talking? You want to hold? And I was like, yeah, I want to hold it. Like, let me help you. But I had never felt seen. I've never seen anybody publicly speak about that. So I love that you shared it. And can you talk about it more?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I think one of the reasons I shared it is because of like my fetishes. I also have a mustache fetish, but these weren't ones I was like smacked on the face with, where I just like realized it or I was exposed to it. It was a process of me being curious and like also having the confidence to like say that or ask that, and like not having any shame associated, or like a lot of times people turn me down when I want to hold their penises when they pee. And that is fine. They don't like, that is totally okay. It doesn't change the fact that I like it. It just means that I'll have like less opportunity with this individual. But it was something where, and I've only been able to do it like a handful of times because most people aren't okay with that, which is fine. And it's like, maybe you will be eventually, but I'm not going to push it. But I have a lot of penis envy, and I don't really know like where I am in terms of like my gender identity, because like I don't feel non-binary. I don't feel trans. I'm not like attracted to genitals, but I definitely like when I'm strapped on or when I'm like playing with a person's penis, it's like, I don't have that part of my body. And it's really cool to see. I don't want to see it in its hard state. I want to see it in all the flaccid states, because that's what it's like most of the time. Yeah. And after I had sex with a friend, we were taking a shower, and I think he was going to pee in the shower. And I was like, can I hold it? And we did that. And it was kind of like a light bulb went off. I'm like, that was really cool. And then I've been able to do it a couple times since then. And it's like, it makes sense when I break it down, because it's a mix of vulnerability. They're in a vulnerable state. Yes. It's a mix of power and control, that like I'm having this control over a very intimate process that they usually do alone. And then you combine that with my penis envy, like, and that's why a lot of people are into like piss play in general. And it's not that I'm into, into Goldens or anything, but it's something that's like a very intimate and private act that someone can be letting you into.
No, I totally relate there. I think that's totally my vibe as well. And I think it started off a little bit more as like to me, like you said, that curiosity and just that like playfulness. And I was just like, this isn't a part of my body. This is a super intimate experience. And like, will you let me into it? Yeah. And
I then also feeling that power. Sitting like reverse cowgirl on someone, or reverse cow person, so that their genitals are kind of aligned with yours. And then you can like literally just pretend that it's your penis.
See, I don't know that I don't know how that would feel for me, but I do like peeing at the same time. Okay. So I will do like, let's both sit on the toilet.
Someone recommended that, where like, or something where you're like both peeing together, or they're peeing while they're sitting on you.
Yeah. Well, like I'll sit on the toilet and I'll pee, and then like they pee like through my legs, and we pee at the same time. Yeah. And this is where sometimes I'm like, maybe I'm just like 8 years old and I'm just like, yeah, let's pee together. But it does feel like an intimate, like fun thing to do. And then sometimes it'll be like, I'll sit on them kind of like cowgirl style, and sit on their lap, and then just hold their penis while they pee. But it for me, it's usually always something as like a form of aftercare after sex. That then when we both go pee afterwards, it still is kind of this like intimate thing where it's like, I want to hold him.
Yeah, I just have like this genuine curiosity where like I'll still ask my like boyfriend, be like, what is it like having a penis? Just tell me about it. And he'd be like, oh, well, like, I don't know, what's it like having a vulva? And I'm like, it's just like a general mystery. And like sometimes you don't know what's coming out of it, and if you're sick or if you're just horny. Yeah. And he's like, oh wow, no, having a penis is not like that at all.
Yeah, like it's an open wound in my body that's super, super sensitive, you know. Any small
day-to-day mystery. That's all.
Yes. Yeah. Well, another thing that you are very well known for, which I'm so curious to get into a little bit more, is holding the world record for volume in squirting.
Not distance, volume.
In volume. And when I found you and when I found that, I was like, I got to start measuring my squirt. How the fuck do you measure your squirt?
The first time I ever measured it was for the world record. I just knew that I would squirt like insane amounts, and people would comment on it, and you know, and then I saw the physical evidence. But so basically I worked with a different scientist, and she would say that the max amount that someone could squirt was 950 milliliters. And I'd always joked like, oh, I'm pretty sure I could crush that though. And when I, went to just kind of for fun of like, look up the world record, it's like, oh, it doesn't exist. So I can set one. And by the time I'm setting the record, then it's like, well, I can squirt any amount and it's going to be the record. But the vanity in me wanted to hit a liter. I wanted to hit that mark to, also make a statement that we don't know as much about squirting as we think we do. A lot of the things that science tells us isn't true. And then also I do this without orgasming or penetrating myself. And I really wanted to change the narrative of, I feel like squirting still revolves around like a partnered activity or the male ego, when the reality is I can do it by myself. And it's not related to another person at all. It's just my body and the way it expresses itself.
Yeah. I've only been able to squirt one time by myself, and man, oh man, was I so proud. I was so proud. I took a picture of like the carpet all wet, and I was like, I did that to myself.
There you go. That's the thing is like, whether you do it by yourself or with someone else, like if your body does it, that's still your body. You know that your body is capable of it. It doesn't matter how you do it.
Yeah. And so for you, you did this without penetration.
Yeah, that's generally like so I like taught a class once, and someone asked at the end, they're like, what's the fastest way for someone to get you to squirt? And I was like, have them ask me to do it myself. That's the fastest way. Because, it's a lot of my like mind body connection. But the thing that I like the most is rubbing my clit externally. So as long as I'm like, aroused and engorged with like most of the time, there's like a baseline of that, then that's the easiest way to do it, because nothing's blocking my vaginal canal, which can sometimes get in the way.
Yeah. There was one time that I did squirt just from, well, granted it was still partnered and was after, after penetrative and after oral and everything. But yeah, where they just really DJ'd up at the clit, and it was a lot. I was I kept trying to close my legs, and he was like, stay open, keep your legs open. I very much trusted this partner, and felt like in a lot of care. And so I kept my legs open, and then also was reminding to keep my body and my mind open. And it was just like overwhelming amounts of pleasure. And then I had squirted previously to that in my life, but that definitely felt the most like I was peeing. Like it was a lot. And now the competitor in me wants to be like, I'm going to measure my volume now.
Yeah, go for it, man. Why not? I mean, a lot of people will like threaten me with it too, but also the stipulations of my record are that it's without the assistance of anyone else or a toy. But I'm all for healthy competition. I mean, ideally I could have held an event where there were multiple people competing with me, but I couldn't find, now people are coming out of the woodwork, and then there's some other like fantasies and things that I'm like, okay, I need to start collecting you so we can make all these things happen. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good that your person was saying like, you know, keep this open, keep that open. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, just relax. And it's like, oh, go fuck yourself. Like, don't tell someone to do that. And that's not necessarily what it's about. It's more of just like trusting your body. And if a sensation feels overwhelming, like put your mind's eye somewhere else and then focus it back. Because it's like, you know, you're not paying attention to how your pinky toe is feeling. But when I talk about it, maybe you're thinking about it now. So like where our mind is, that can often play a part if something is overwhelming.
Yeah, because definitely before squirting, I'm very, very overwhelmed. I feel like I'm having an exorcism.
Yeah, it can be like at times it can be really quite intense. And I was actually just thinking about this earlier today because like whenever people start squirting and they like really love it or they want to talk about it, I'm like, talk to me in a year because you're going to hate it a bit. Like, let me wait until that sets in because like I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I also hate it sometimes. And I think especially the thing that like I was just thinking about today that just is so ridiculous is all of these other people that are like, oh my God, squirting so hot. I love this. They're like projecting their fantasy onto me when I'm literally just like, this is how my body behaves. And that's what it does. If you like it, that's great. But also I'm going to hate it. And I want you to hate it with me sometimes too. Or even like, I mean, right now, my boyfriend is such a dream with it because he knows that I hate it and he supports that. And like, he is the one to get out like, you know, the different pads and things like as soon as he feels like the time is right. And the fact that I don't have to worry about that as much, like that's what being a supportive squirting partner is. It's not like making it about you. It's just making it so this other person feels a little bit better. And it is so ridiculous to me that it's the majority of it is about a lot of people thinking it's really hot. I'm just like, can I just exist in the world? Can I like, can I just engage in experience without you like focusing it all on your desire and projecting that onto me?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that too is not just that it's hot, but that it's, if I get you to do this, it says something about me and I can feel good about myself that I know you can do this and now I can get you to do it. And a bit of that like ego kind of feeding that's where I typically feel like, okay.
So I say my squirting class is just like disappointing then, really, because one of my former lovers would be like, he's like, honestly, I feel like a light breeze could get you to squirt. And I'm like, sometimes, yeah.
Yep. I love that. I think to the point of hating squirting, I think that is something that in the past when I've talked about it, like on Instagram and stuff, that people have very much expressed a sense of like embarrassment and not liking it and how do you prepare for it. And I think to your point of having a supportive partner, I mean, I wouldn't even, my previous partner, I'd be like, no, you can't even start to finger me unless we have a towel down. So it was like that, or like I need to get up and we need to be like standing up over the floor or something, or you better be prepared for cleanup. And he would always help with cleanup afterwards. And that's kind of where it would feel a little bit more like that, you know, aftercare that's still intimate. But it's weird because on one hand, there is this, you know, really, really heightened sexualization, fantasizing about people that are squirting. And in the same token, it's this like, ew, like you peeing everywhere, like, ugh.
So it's seriously, it's like, it's equally like fetishized and shame. And it's like, it's really hard to find people who exist in the middle. Where they're just kind of like ambivalent about it, or they like honestly just like let your person decide. I was really lucky that the first time that I was at least aware that I squirted, the person I was with basically was like, oh, you squirted. Is that something that you do? So he waited for me to basically like say my relationship with it before he was like, oh my God, that's so hot. It's all about me. Like and like, I'm lucky that happened because he could have easily shamed me. He could have easily fetishized it. But he asked a question instead. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I guess I do. And he's like, okay, she doesn't seem like she hates it. So then we continued.
Yeah, that is sweet. I think it's so weird. My like experience with squirting first with my first partner. And I was like scared. I was like, what's happening? Like, I'm scared. I don't know what's happening. I was like 16. And after that, with someone I wasn't like really in relationship with and feeling super embarrassed. And then in my most recent relationship, like never having that amount of liquid come out of me before. And in part feeling concerned, and of also like, are they okay? Are you okay? Because that you put in a lot of work and a lot of things just came your way.
Yeah, I'm more just like making sure people don't drown. That is my genuine concern.
But part of me kind of wants you to drown.
It's like, it's always, I mean, it's crazy. Like, I'm still surprised at like what my body can produce. And that's why I think it's kind of hot if I like, you know, if my legs happen to be over my head or something and I get like splashed in the face with my own squirt, I'm like, wow, that's so hot. That's like, cause like my body's it's just crazy. And it's really cool to just be amazed at it sometimes. Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like pure, like it feels like very animalistic chaos of like a sexual experience of our bodies like reacting and engaging in this experience. Part of me really like wants to like drown someone in my cum, and like it's very like it feels romantic to drench someone in my squirt.
I mean, it's definitely very primal of like marking your territory. But you did say cum, and I want to be clear that it's not. It's not cum, or it's not an orgasm. It can be. I like to call it more like a physical manifestation of pleasure.
Yeah. Whether it's cum or it's squirting or I'm orgasming, like putting that on my partner, experiencing that with my partner, sharing that with them, it feels very, very romantic to me. Mm-hmm.
And like when I had first started squirting and I didn't have like a tethered partner or anything, I was just kind of, you know, being a hoe, you know, in a great way.
Hoe it up.
I really used that of like, oh, this is a thing that people really like, and it can be a way I satisfy them by doing this. And I really like held on to that so much. And that wasn't really good either, because I'm still doing it for other people's pleasure, but it found like a really easy way that I could be validated of like, I did a thing, you enjoyed it, you're happy because I did a thing. And that's what I mean when I'm like, talk to me after a year of squirting or squirting regularly, because I thought I really liked it a lot at that point. And then I started realizing like, wait, I'm not orgasming, I'm just squirting. And like, that's fun, but maybe let's like, you know, change our role a little bit here. And then also just like the cleanup is just it's very annoying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to like the process of getting to the point of squirting solo. Because I feel like majority, like you even said, if somebody were to like compete with you in this record, not a lot of people I feel like squirt solo.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's two camps of people. I think there's people who like squirt after a particular type of stimulation. And then I think there's other people whose bodies, like how they express themselves is squirting. And don't take my word for this, but I think for that, you know, that second one, there might be something genetic at play, because I know a lot of people who, you know, their body expresses themselves squirting, and like through some, you know, very confident conversations with their family have found out that like sister, mom, grandma, and like, that's kind of bananas. Like my mom squirts. She'd hate that I'm saying this, but I was like, it's science, mom. We need to know this.
Yeah.
I asked my grandma and I don't think she knew what it meant.
I'm gonna have to ask my grandma now after this.
She thought it meant like orgasming, and she's like, yeah, I do it all the time. And I'm like, I don't think you know what I'm talking about. It
is a very different experience. And you also engage in being a unicorn and I don't know if you want to use the word dating, but like being intimate, dating, yes, with couples.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, that's more my style of how I like to hook up with people, how I like to be the third, or how I like to have group sex in general, unless it's like at a sex party. But I don't like one-off things. I like things that are still, even if it's like casual and we're really just having sex, I still want to be people that I can hang out with, because that's more of the sex that I like to have. So for other people, but that's why I call it dating. It's not serious. I'm not in a like close relationship with these people, but it's still some sort of relationship.
Yeah. I am a big fan of that myself as well. And I think it's like, first of all, if I'm having sex, I want it to be good. Second of all, I don't want to just have good sex once. I want that to be, I want consistency. I want that to be reliable, to be able to continue to have, and also to hold relationship with that person.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can share a little bit. I've shared in the past on the podcast some of my exploration with couples and experimenting with being a unicorn. Wondering if you can share kind of how that came about for you.
Yeah. And it's interesting if I kind of think about my exploration with people on like a one-to-one basis versus my exploration with like couples. I kind of went about it in the same way and kind of made mistakes in the same way.
Yeah.
Which, you know, sometimes that's how you learn, but a lot of it is like, I'm just going to throw myself into this. I don't know what I'm doing. And then I might notice like, oh, I really feel like shit a lot after this. Why is that? And what do I need to adjust either for myself or the people that I'm choosing or the types of relationships that I'm pursuing? And so in this case, I threw myself into dating couples via the app Feeld, Feeld, which is that's where I met my boyfriend. That's where I met one of my lovers. That's where I've met like so many people. And I really like dating apps for me because I don't like feeling hunted in general. And because I'm a very strong personality, like I don't want people to feel hunted by me either. And this is a very like good middle ground. And I think I just kind of started hooking up with couples, but also I didn't know enough. And I really subscribed to what I didn't know at the time was couple privilege. And I honestly felt that because this was a couple and I was a single person, mind you, I'd never been in a relationship before, but I believed that their partnership was more important than my needs and desires and boundaries. And that like, you know, they had to be protected at all costs, which is just not true. And I think that's where a lot of the issue came up with, is I felt like, you know, because it's like 2 against 1, there's nothing that I could say or do. And I just had to accept whatever they decided at all times, whether that's before the sex, during the sex, after the sex, you know, whatever that may be. And I think eventually what I was able to discover through trial and error was I had like the best and most fulfilling times when there were people, and like this is how the conversation went verbatim. We would go out and meet for a drink because I'm not meeting up with anyone to have sex. We have to meet first.
Yeah.
But we would do that to make sure I jive with both people and they did with me. And afterwards I'd be like, you guys are so cool and you're so hot. And like, I would love to have sex with you, but also like, I also just want to hang out with you too. So like, even if that doesn't happen, I still think you're really awesome. And, you know, sometimes it would manifest into sex, sometimes it wouldn't, but those are still the relationships that I, you know, keep in contact with to this day. Cause I just think they're like really awesome people. So, you know, just adding sex to that mix becomes a really fun time. And I mean, some of the people, maybe I only hook up with one person in the couple. Like I remember one time I went out with a couple in Amsterdam and like, oh my God, they were both so gorgeous and so cool and so brilliant. And I think there just ended up being more of a spark between me and like the boyfriend. And so like, we, you know, separated. And I think his partner was just kind of like, there seems to be a bit more between you. Why don't you go and explore that? And which was just like so cool that I'm like, oh, they have this communication. I don't have to have this worry of someone feeling like jealous or threatened by me, because that shouldn't be my responsibility as the unicorn. And I feel like that's a lot of that's the misconception I had going into it, was I took on way too much responsibility as a unicorn, way too much. And and also for people who are thinking about like how to protect the relationship, if there is so much that you're scared of, maybe you shouldn't be bringing in a third person. Like there are plenty of ways to spice up your relationship that don't involve hurting someone or potentially hurting them. Have you been hurt? Have you been hurt by couples?
I would not say I have been hurt by couples. For the most part, my couple experiences have been what feel very... They feel in alignment. I think at times I've had to question, you know, I don't always necessarily want to continue hanging out with them. Sometimes I feel like I just exclusively enjoy like having sex with you guys. I don't necessarily want to, you know, go be out at a bar, necessarily get dinner. Like I want to come over. I want to like play like little board game or whatever, and then kind of like get into it. But I do think like my very first experience as a couple engaging
like
with a unicorn.
Where you're the couple engaging with the,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I
That's
think
a lot different.
Yeah. That's where I've gotten hurt. I haven't gotten hurt as a unicorn, but being within the couple, and also with the caveat here that I was very young. This was my first relationship in high school, and we did not know what we were doing. We were just doing things, and betrayal happened, and there was miscommunications, and just not being intentional about what we were doing because we didn't even know. But I think if I were to do that as an adult now, there's almost been opportunities in the past, but it just didn't feel like it was really in alignment. Like it didn't actually feel right where we were both really excited about it. But I feel like I would have a better experience being within a couple engaging with a unicorn than I did then.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot more now.
Exactly. And also it's like, because you've had some experiences, it's also not like, if this doesn't happen now, it will never happen. Like if it's not right, there will be more opportunities. There are always more opportunities.
Yeah. Is there any kind of advice that you would want to give to people who perhaps are interested in being a unicorn?
For people that are interested in being a unicorn, like, I mean, one is like, understand what couple privilege is, and that it's, don't let that fly. Your boundaries, needs, desires, all those things are just as important. And then also just paying attention of, with what people are saying to you. And honestly, like, it's all really similar to single person hookups and dating. Like, you're going to have a values list and they're going to have a values list. And sometimes those match up and sometimes they don't. Maybe you want to, like, you're like, kissing is my favorite part of sex and I want to be able to kiss everyone. And there's a couple who's like, you can't kiss this person. But just being wary of some people, they end up putting up certain boundaries due to fear of like, I don't want to deal with an uncomfortable feeling, so this shouldn't happen. But granted, trauma isn't a just uncomfortable feeling. That's trauma. But we shouldn't be like shielding ourselves from uncomfortable feelings. And I know you had Gabrielle Smith on previously, and like she is so amazing and smart. And I think the way she talks about jealousy and how like, jealousy is not a real emotion. It's a signal of something else you need to address. Like that's a really important thing to think about. And jealousy is not the responsibility of a unicorn.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, like, as you're saying that, I'm reminded to, like, really important to, I think, communicate desires and, like, expectations, because for me, the experiences that I've enjoyed engaging in as a unicorn are much more where I'm being brought into the relationship for them to kind of worship, for them to not necessarily that I'm assisting them in their sex, but that they are getting to kind of experience each other having sex with me.
But see, you already described so much more there than a lot of people would. Because a lot of time when you're like, how do you want to feel? What are your desires? And I'm like, I want it to be hot. I want to be turned on. But what you're describing is feelings. You're like, I want it to feel this way. And that can tell you so much more about what kind of experience someone wants and if that matches up with you. I've shared a similar thing to couples where I'm like, I don't want to worry about anyone being jealous or about like worrying about your relationship. And then I've had a couple being like, oh my God, that's so horrible. How about we both focus on you at first? And then we can like figure out where things go. And like, even just that gesture, like make sure as a unicorn that like they are showing care. And it's not all about them and what you, like what you were saying, it's not about what you can do for them. It's about what all of you can do for each other. And also just like if that matches up or not with them.
Yeah. The one couple that I did really enjoy being intimate with, they were so conscious and intentional about what brought me pleasure, both of them, heterosexual couple. And they really wanted to kind of watch each other please me. And that was so fun. That was so exciting. I love that.
You're like, all right, they did a better job. You have to do better now.
Yes. Well, and it's just like you still have responsibility showing up as a unicorn, but it's a much different kind of responsibility. And it feels just like
responsibility is like a human, as a lover.
Yeah. It's I just love all the different ways in which we can like get creative and get in touch with that playful side of ourselves in sex, and, you know, just stepping outside of what, as we grow up, is just like, you know, you have missionary sex with a man who will impregnate you. And that's sex.
That's it. Man, but no wonder we didn't cover pegging. Like,
no wonder. Yes. I have to get on a group call with a bunch of sex therapists after this. But yeah, I'm just going to continue talking about sex. But I've so appreciated you sharing your own personal experiences and some of your knowledge. I would love for you to share a bit of where people can find you, how people can engage with you, how they can support you, all of those things.
Yeah, you can follow me at lolajean.com with the DOT spelled out, both on Twitter and Instagram. That's also my website with the DOT not spelled out. And there you can purchase, you know, future classes, class recordings, as well as the Quick and Dirty series, which covers choking, wrestling, pegging, and squirting. And that's where you can also find 7 days of domination as well.
Mm-hmm. Choking was something I wanted to talk to you about today.
Well, you know, I can hook you up with my co-instructor, LT. They're a phenomenal resource. And like, honestly, I learned most of what I know wrestling-wise from them.
Okay, amazing. Let's get them on. Yes. I would absolutely love that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming. I'm cheesy. Thank you. All right, that does it for today's episode. Thank you so much for making it all the way through and keeping your ears, your hearts, and your minds open. It would mean so much to me if you could take a second or two after listening to this episode to leave a review on iTunes and let me know what you're enjoying about the show. I love reading, you know, what your favorite episodes are, where you guys listen, and definitely feel free to share this with a friend. I mean, part of how we break down the stigmas around these topics is by talking about them, right? And sharing them with more people. So definitely share the podcast. And again, really wanting to include all of you in this podcast. So if you have questions or you want to share a thought or an experience, please send in a voice memo to ask.letstalkaboutit@gmail.com. And I'm really excited to keep having these conversations and breaking down these stigmas. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk to you next time.